The moment I pulled into our driveway that afternoon, I knew something was wrong. Not because of anything I could see, exactly. The house looked the same cream-colored shutters, the same rose bushes my mother-in-law had complained about for 3 years, because she said they made the front look country. But there was a silver Mercedes I didn't recognize parked at the curb, and my husband was standing on the porch with his arms crossed, and next to him stood his mother, Lorraine, wearing that expression she always wore when she'd already decided something without bothering to tell me. I sat in the car for a moment with my hand still on the gear shift. I had just come from my father's attorney's office, 40 minutes across town, sitting in a leather chair across from a man named Mr. Hartwell, who kept folding and unfolding his glasses while he explained that my father, my quiet, stubborn, impossible father who'd spent 30 years building a small commercial real estate portfolio in suburban Ohio, had left everything to me. The properties, the accounts, the townhouse in Columbus he'd never sold because, as the letter explained in his own handwriting, he was saving it for me when the time was right. When Mr. Hartwell said the total figure, I genuinely did not process it for several seconds. I asked him to repeat it. $4.2 million. I'd sat in that chair for probably 10 minutes after he finished talking, just staring at the window behind his head where pigeons were walking back and forth on a ledge. And now I was sitting in my own driveway with that number still ringing in my ears, and my husband and his mother were watching me through the windshield with the kind of stillness that made my stomach drop. I got out of the car. "We need to talk," my husband said before I'd even made it to the porch steps. "His name is Kevin. We'd been married for 11 years. "Okay," I said. "Let me put my bag down first. Claire." That was Lorraine. She said my name the way she always said it, flat like a correction. "There's something you should know." I looked at her, then at Kevin. He wasn't meeting my eyes. "Come inside," I said. "Actually," Kevin said and cleared his throat, "this won't take long." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He held it out to me. I didn't take it right away. I just looked at it, white and rectangular and unremarkable, and I had a feeling I recognized from being a child, the feeling of standing at the edge of something you can't unstep into. I took the envelope. Inside were divorce papers, already filed, already signed by him. I read the first page carefully, then the second. Then I looked up. "The house has been sold," Kevin said. "Closing was this morning. You have until the end of the month to remove your personal belongings." I heard the words. I understood the words individually. But the sentence itself took a moment to fully land. "I'm sorry," I said. Lorraine made a small sound that was almost like satisfaction. "He said the house has been sold, Claire. It's not your house anymore. It never really was." I looked at Kevin again. He had his chin lifted the way he did when he was trying to project confidence. I had seen that expression 1,000 times. I knew every version of it, the real confidence which was rare and this version which meant he was scared underneath and covering it. "Kevin," I said quietly, "whose name was on the deed?" He didn't answer immediately. "Both of ours," I said. "Both of our names have been on that deed since 2016. So I'm genuinely curious how a closing happened this morning without my signature." Something shifted on his face, just slightly. "It was handled," Lorraine said. "Handled," I repeated. "You weren't reachable." I looked at her. I breathed. And then, and I genuinely did not plan this, I smiled. I don't know exactly what my face looked like in that moment, but whatever it was made Kevin take one step back. Just one. Barely noticeable. But I noticed. "What is so funny?" Lorraine said. Her voice had gone sharp. "Nothing," I said. "Nothing at all. I'm going to go inside and make some tea." I walked past both of them and into my own house, which apparently no longer belonged to me. I want to go back. Because none of what happened that afternoon came out of nowhere, and if I'm being honest with myself, which I've had a lot of time to be, over the past few years I saw the shape of it long before I admitted it to myself. Kevin and I met when I was 27. He was charming in that particular way some men are charming, the kind that makes you feel specifically seen, like he'd been waiting for exactly you. He made me laugh. He remembered small things I'd mentioned in passing. He called my father Sir the first time they met, and my father, who trusted almost no one, shook his hand and said, "He'll do." We got married in 2013. In my grandmother's backyard in Cincinnati. Lorraine wore a cream-colored dress that was close enough to white that my aunt still brings it up. For the first few years, things were fine. Not perfect, Lorraine was always a presence, always inserting opinions about our house, our finances, when we were going to have children, why I was still working when Kevin made enough for both of us. But I had a good job as a financial analyst at a mid-sized firm downtown, and I liked my work, and I was good at it, and I told myself that Lorraine was just one of those mothers-in-law, and that Kevin balanced things reasonably well. I told myself a lot of things. The first sign I actually registered was about 4 years in. I noticed that Kevin had started having separate conversations with Lorraine about our finances, not disagreements. Conversations, the kind where I'd walk into a room and they'd shift the topic. When I asked Kevin about it, he said I was being paranoid. I am a financial analyst. I am not paranoid about numbers. I am paid specifically to notice things. So I started paying attention. It took me nearly a year to understand the full picture, and another year to start documenting it. Kevin had been quietly funneling money out of our joint accounts into a separate account I wasn't on. Small amounts at first, 200 here, 500 there, the kind of thing that could look like gas and groceries if you weren't looking closely. But I was looking closely. I built a spreadsheet. I tracked every transfer. By the time I fully understood what he was doing, the total was just over $60,000. I didn't confront him. I know that probably sounds strange. But I'd been a financial analyst long enough to know that you don't tip your hand before you've finished your documentation. You gather everything first, then you decide what to do with it. And while I was gathering, something else happened that changed the entire picture. My father got sick. He'd been in declining health for a while, but the diagnosis, congestive heart failure, made everything sudden and final in a way that his general stubbornness had been managing to keep at bay. I drove to Columbus every other weekend. I sat with him. We talked more in those 18 months than we had in the previous decade. He was a quiet man who'd spent most of his life showing love through doing rather than saying, and somewhere in those final months, he started saying some things. One afternoon in the fall, sitting in his kitchen while he complained about the nurse his doctor had sent, he looked at me and said, "You know I'm leaving everything to you, Dad." I said, "Don't. I mean it. All of it. The properties. Everything." I didn't build it to watch it disappear. He looked at his coffee cup. "I know things haven't been easy for you with Kevin." I didn't answer that. "I'm not a fool," he said quietly. "He died on a Tuesday in February, about 8 months before Kevin handed me those divorce papers on the porch. I was with him. I held his hand. And after the funeral, after all the arrangements and the relatives and the long drive home, I sat in my car in our garage for probably 20 minutes and let myself cry in a way I hadn't allowed in years. Kevin knocked on the car window and asked if I was going to come inside. I want to be careful here not to say I had everything figured out, because I didn't. I was grieving. I was tired. But I had enough to understand that something was coming, and that I needed to be ready when it arrived. The sale of our house, that was the piece I didn't see coming. Or rather, I saw that it was possible but didn't know exactly how Kevin and Lorraine had managed the mechanics. What I found out later through my attorney was that Lorraine had connected Kevin with a notary she knew through her real estate agent, a woman who had a history of, let's say, creative paperwork. Kevin had produced a power of attorney document with my signature on it, my signature that I had never signed. They had forged it, and they had used it to sell our house, our $480,000 house in a neighborhood that had appreciated steadily for her 7 years, to a buyer who turned out to be a man Lorraine knew from her country club. What they didn't know was that about 6 weeks before all of this, I had quietly visited a different attorney. Not my father's, a separate one. A woman named Ms. Alvarez who specialized in family law and asset protection. I had brought my spreadsheet. I had brought my documentation. I had brought copies of everything I'd gathered over 3 years. Ms. Alvarez had listened without interrupting, asked 4 precise questions, and then said, "When this comes to a head, you call me first. Before you say anything, before you do anything, you call me." I had her number saved under book club in my phone. So when I walked back into my house that afternoon and made a cup of tea and heard Kevin and Lorraine on the porch talking in low voices, the first thing I did was send Ms. Alvarez a text that said, "It happened. Call when you can." The second thing I did was take photographs of every room in the house methodically, the way I'd been trained to document anything that might matter later. The third thing I did was sit down at the kitchen table and drink my tea. Kevin came inside eventually. He sat across from me with the look of a man who'd expected a different kind of scene and wasn't sure what to do with the one he was getting. "I know this is a shock," he said. "Is it?" I said. I want you to know that I'm not trying to leave you with nothing. There'll be some settlement from Kevin, I said. Did you forge my signature on a power of attorney document? The color in his face changed. Because if you did, I said, that's a felony. In Ohio, that's forgery under Revised Code 2291331, and depending on the value involved, it can be a third-degree felony. The property sold for $480,000, which puts it squarely in the receipt where the prosecutor's office tends to take interest. He stared at me. I'm just telling you, I said, what I know. Because I've known things for a while now, Kevin. I've been knowing things. He stood up, he said something I won't repeat, left the kitchen. I picked up my phone and saw that Ms. Alvarez had already texted back. On my way to a hearing, free at 4, don't sign anything. I put the phone face down on the table and finished my tea. What followed were several weeks that I wouldn't wish on anyone, and also, strangely, several weeks during which I felt more clear-headed than I had in years. Ms. Alvarez moved quickly. She filed an emergency motion to void the property sale based on the fraudulent power of attorney. The buyer, Lorraine's country club acquaintance, turned out to have been aware enough of the irregularities that his own attorney advised him not to fight the motion. The sale was unwound within 3 weeks. The notary who'd authenticated the forged document lost her license and subsequently cooperated with the investigation. Kevin's attorney, facing the documentation I'd provided Ms. Alvarez, 3 years of financial records, the transfer history, the forged POA, communications between Kevin and Lorraine that my attorney had obtained through discovery, advised him in very clear terms that going to trial would be catastrophic. Lorraine hired her own attorney. This was, in retrospect, a mistake for her, because it created a clear legal record that she had acted in concert with Kevin and not merely as a peripheral family member. The $63,000 Kevin had moved out of our joint accounts was recovered as part of the divorce settlement, along with the house which was retitled in my name during proceedings, along with a portion of Kevin's retirement accounts, which Ms. Alvarez had flagged early and had frozen pending the outcome. Kevin avoided criminal charges by the thinnest possible margin via a plea agreement that required him to make full financial restitution and perform community service. His attorney negotiated this. Kevin did not look at me once during the mediation session where this was finalized. Lorraine did not avoid a civil suit. I hadn't planned on filing one initially, but Ms. Alvarez laid out the case: conspiracy to commit fraud, interference with marital property, and I thought about all the times Lorraine had looked at me across a dinner table like I was something temporary in her son's life, something she was waiting to outlast, and I said, yes, file it. The judgment was not enormous by some standards, but it required Lorraine to liquidate a rental property she'd held for 20 years to pay it. Her real estate agent, the one who'd connected her with the fraudulent notary, had their license reviewed. The country club heard about it. I know because mutual friends told me. Lorraine stopped attending for a while. I don't have any particular feelings about that, one way or the other. I genuinely don't. The money from my father's estate came through about 4 months into all of this. Mr. Hartwell managed the transfer with the same quiet efficiency he'd managed everything else. I sat in his office again on a Tuesday afternoon in April and signed the final documents, and he shook my hand and said my father would have been glad. I held it together until I got to the parking garage. Then I sat in my car and cried for a little while. Not sad exactly. Just the particular feeling of things finally settling into their right place after a long time of being wrong. $4.2 million. Properties that generated income. A townhouse in Columbus that my father had held onto because, as it turned out, he'd always had a plan. I'd been renting an apartment since leaving the house. A 1-bedroom near downtown that had good light and a washer-dryer in unit and cost $1,100 a month, which I paid with money I had and a salary I still earned because I had kept my job throughout everything, which Kevin had once suggested I didn't need. I stayed in that apartment for another 6 months after the estate transfer. Not because I couldn't move, but because I wanted to. I wanted to live simply for a while and know that everything around me was exactly what it was. Mine, and chosen, and uncomplicated. I did eventually sell the townhouse my father had kept, not because I needed to, but because I wanted the liquidity to do something else with it. Something I'd thought about for a long time but told myself wasn't practical. My firm had a client, a small commercial developer who was starting to pivot into mixed-use properties in mid-sized Midwest cities. We'd worked on the financial side of 2 of his projects. He mentioned, one afternoon in a meeting, that he was looking for a partner to co-develop a property in Dayton, a former warehouse near the Arts District that had good bones and terrible ownership history and enormous potential. I looked at the numbers for 3 days. Then I called him and said I was interested. My name is on the LLC. My father's name is on the small bronze plaque we had made for the building's lobby. Not as advertisement, just as acknowledgement. A quiet thing, like he was. The building opened 8 months ago. It has 12 residential units on the upper floors, all rented. The ground floor has a cafe and a small accounting practice, and a woman who does alterations and has been in business for 31 years and needed a space that wasn't trying to price her out. I walk through it sometimes on weekend mornings when the light is coming in from the east side. It's the best light, my father would have noticed it. I'm not telling this story because I think my situation was unique. If anything, the opposite. I know too many women who have been in some version of this, the slow financial erosion, the paperwork they didn't know to look for, the moment where someone handed them an envelope and expected them to fall apart. What I want to say, and I mean this plainly, without drama, is that the spreadsheet saved me, the documentation saved me. Not the anger, not the satisfaction of watching Lorraine have to sell her rental property, not any of the things that feel good in a story. It was the records. It was 3 years of noticing and writing things down and not tipping my hand. If you are in a marriage where something feels wrong with the money, something that gets explained away when you ask about it, something that shifts whenever you get close to it, write it down. Keep copies of everything somewhere that isn't your shared home. Find an attorney before you need one urgently. Know what documents have your name on them. Know what documents should have your name on them and don't. My father spent 30 years building something from nothing. He built it carefully, with records and patience, and a very low tolerance for anyone who tried to tell him not to pay attention. I am his daughter. And as it turns out, that is enough. That has always been enough. I just needed time to fully understand it.